we were planning once more another voyage of adventure, this time Africa. From Antwerp, Belgium to Paris, through France and Spain to the Straits of Gibraltar, and then down across the vast continent of Africa to the Indian Ocean. We had received the necessary permits from the British, French, and Belgian governments. We were awaiting in Antwerp the arrival of our trucks by freighter from New York. For 18 months, these trucks were to be our living quarters. Loaded with supplies, they weighed 6 tons apiece. A few hours later, we had the honor of being received in the Royal Palace in Brussels by the King and Queen of Belgium. King Leopold, himself a keen photographer, minutely inspected our trucks and especially our photographic equipment. Queen Astrid talked graciously to Mrs. Dennis. Little we knew that barely a few weeks later, we were to hear in the center of Africa the tragic news of Queen Astrid's death. The hour of our official departure had come. The last interviews were given, the last photographs taken, and we were on our way. The Place de la Concorde in Paris, gray on this February morning, bitterly cold on the windswept mountains of Spain, and now the famous Rock of Gibraltar faced us across the bay. We were on the docks of Algeciras, and again our truck short crossing of the straits, which would take us to Spanish Morocco. A week after leaving Brussels, we were on African soil. Ceuta, where we land, has modern docks and a modern ramp to lead into the ancient city. But soon we strike inland and enter another world. We are approaching the sacred city of Moulay Idris. It is the time of the Grand Moussem, a famous yearly Mohammedan festival. The wealthy Arabs have come on magnificent Arabian horses. Pilgrims flock into the city in thousands, and already the fantasias have begun. See them go. The finest horses and the finest horsemen in the world. Within the city, the crowd overflows everywhere. The rooftops are crowded. Thousands pour through the narrow archways into the marketplace. It is with difficulty that we make our way through the crowd and that Roy Phelps takes his pictures. Entertainers have come to the city from all over Morocco. The solemn fire dancers who hold burning coals in their hands and produce lighted torches from their flowing sleeves. The fire eaters who breathe in flames and smoke and assure the credulous pilgrims that fire is their only diet. And see this fellow. He's only breaking bottles. But wait, he does not break them as you and I. This is a bed he is making. He's very tired and wants to take a beauty rest nap. And see this one. He's not tired but hungry. No fire for him. Nothing will satisfy him but well-blended broken bottle. What an idea for a breakfast food. And here is a snake charmer, as daring as those of India. This is the African black cobra, as vicious and as deadly as the Indian cobra. Drums and flute provide the hypnotic music. And now we are approaching the long-forbidden city of Fez. Every day is market day at the gates of the city, and for centuries these walls have witnessed the age-old bargaining of the East. Today is the sheep market, and hundreds of sheep tied in neat bundles neck to neck patiently await their fate. Buying and selling is thirsty work, but there comes the ever-present water carrier, and there the ever-present beggar. Through the ancient gates we enter into the city. After 30 years of French occupation, Old Fez has not changed much, and it has not lost its medieval aspect and traditions. Its guilds of artisans still do their painstaking work by hand in small and dimly lighted workshops. This is a copper worker's shop, one of many hundreds. In every one is a crude lathe turned without electric power, and artists, who have a deep pride in their craft, patiently fashion objects of beauty. The medieval tradition of the apprenticeship still survives. It takes many years to graduate from the spinning wheel to the big looms on which the famed intricate Moroccan rugs and blankets are woven. In a tailor's shop, the tailor sits cross-legged. This complicated braiding is necessary to the making of the Arab burnous, and these children will spend their whole youth in learning its hundreds of possible patterns. See the potter at work. Out of a shapeless lump of clay, his hands can produce any graceful shape. They need far more skill than those of his apprentice, who has only learned to decorate his master's work. Someday, no doubt, the narrow streets will make way for wide arteries with clanging streetcars and motor buses. Power lines will run everywhere. The children will be taken out of the dark little workshops and sent to school. But much of the charm of Fez will be gone as well as its squalor. There will remain only its gorgeous mosaic gates and its lovely minarets to bear witness to its colorful and fascinating past. A formidable barrier of mountains separates the fertile plains of Morocco from the barren wastes of the Sahara Desert. Here, in Africa, are huge cedars and pines and often heavy snow. We had left Europe in winter and had had bitterly cold nights in the mountains of Spain. We were back again in snow and ice, and in our first camp in the Atlas, the water in our radiators froze, and we had to chip ice off the windshields. Africa is a country of contrasts. Look at this hooded figure, passing in a setting so unfamiliar. Look at the telephone lines, for we are still on a thoroughly modern road, the military road across the Atlas Mountains, superbly engineered and built by the French Foreign Legion for the opening up of France's huge African empire. Away once more, we are now swiftly going down the southern side of the mountain range. We learn to appreciate good hydraulic brakes on roads like these. In less than 4 hours, we will pass from a temperature well below freezing to the almost intolerable heat of the desert. At 6 in the morning, we were struggling in snow and ice. At 11, we are in the Ziz Valley, and the temperature has reached 110. We are carrying over 800 gallons of gasoline in our tanks filled to capacity, and even in tins on the roof of the trucks. A brilliantly green carpet of date palms is laid in the bottom of the valley, and towards this cool and lovely garden the road gradually takes us down a series of rocky and barren escarpments. The mountain streams have made the Ziz Valley one of the most fertile in the world, and it is dotted with picturesque villages. The rivers on the southern side of the Atlas Mountains never reach the ocean. They lose themselves and disappear in the Sahara Desert. We cross them on the Foreign Legion's bridges, with an inch to spare on either side, and we enter the Sahara. Reject from your mind all you ever heard about the Sahara being just one huge ocean of sand. There is in the Sahara every kind of barren and forbidding landscape. Huge rocky cliffs, mountain ranges, tumbled masses of rock. In the deepest valleys along its northern as well as its southern edge lie the oases. Graceful palms, the vivid green of which contrasts almost violently with the orange red of the sand dunes and the deep blue of the sky. For several hundreds of miles before we enter the absolutely barren desert, they will dot our course, and rough tracks hard on tires but easy enough going for our powerful dodgers connect them with civilization. The oasis villages still cling to the sides of the mountains. In the coolness of the morning, there is busy activity on the roofs. Even the goats live on the roofs. There is the mosque. The muezzin appears, summoning the faithful to prayer. The sun soon beats down unmercifully on the narrow streets, but there is cool shade along the mud walls and in the dark and crooked passages. is little hard work to do, at least for the men. The men don't even walk when they can help it. But there is one work which the women do, and which goes on all day long. The whole life of the oasis depends on the water of its wells. There are lovely biblical scenes at the wells of the women filling and loading their water jars. Every drop of the precious water must be carried up the steep stairways to the village. Throughout the midday hours, the camels chew. Watch this far one bring up its cud. There, and now watch the near one. Up. Desert food is pretty tough and takes a lot of thoughtful chewing. Late in the afternoon, with a good deal of grumbling and cursing in a weird camel's tongue, the caravans prepare to start. Camels are still the desert's only regular means of communication and transport, and the camels should by now be pretty well resigned to it. But who never grumbles at the beginning of a day's work? Their knees have been hobbled all day, and it probably hurts to stretch the leg. Often these caravans, slowly plodding their way across the sands, make a scene of breathtaking beauty. The sands are never still. The slightest breeze lifts and carries a fine golden powder which comes rippling down the sides of the dunes and slowly, in the course of centuries, alters their outline. Old Saharians tell you the dunes are smoking, and they refer to the light fringe of sand which the wind is blowing off the top of the dunes. Too often a forerunner of terrifying and disastrous sandstorms. In every one of these oasis outposts, the French have a garrison of colonial troops. It is a marvelous sight to see these horsemen galloping by in their brilliant uniforms, mounted on Arabian horses, especially trained to the soft sand of the desert. Their officers are the finest men of the French army, inured as hard as their men to the long marches under a burning sun and to the thirst of the desert. It is not many years since the desert was infested with lawless bands of Tuareg pillagers, and these lonely outposts were in constant danger of attack. This very one stood a heroic and bloody siege. As strict discipline as that of the finest cavalry schools of Europe prevails here, many hundreds of miles from France, among these hard-bitten desert men. And we are now leaving the last of the roads behind us. Before us stretches the desert, hundreds of miles of sand and gravel, sometimes firm and smooth so that we can make good time, sometimes perfectly hard under a thin covering of soft sand, sometimes soft and without bottom under a thin hard crust which suddenly gives way under the wheels. There is in the Sahara every kind of sand, and weeks of experience will not teach you where a surface which is to all appearances hard will unexpectedly give way. The dreaded rotten earth is the worst, as fluid and slippery as talcum powder. Sometimes as we shoveled and sweated, a camel caravan would pass, and how scornfully the camels would look at us. They had no 6-ton load to carry, however, and no 4-ton trailer to pull. We had been many times assured that the attempt to pull a 4-ton trailer across the Sahara was lunacy, and I came close to believing it. With their terrible overload, the Dodge trucks took almost unbelievable punishment. Remember that they did this day after day for hundreds of miles, in a temperature of 120 to 130. Our progress was at times dishearteningly slow. On our worst day, we did less in 12 hours, less than 100 yards. And then, sometimes when we least expected it, the wheels would suddenly bite, pull out. We would change into second, into high, creep up to 35 and 40. The secret of Sahara driving is at all costs keep up speed on tires deflated to less than half normal pressure. Every 100 miles or so, I would look for a hard patch on which it would be safe to stop, and I would signal the trucks for a quick inspection of motors and tires and refueling. Aside from spare tires, we used 60 tires on the whole trip and half a ton of spare parts which we never needed and never used. The trailer carried 400 gallons of gasoline for the first leg of the desert crossing, and we planned to abandon it after this first leg. There was little to vary the monotony of the trip. Tracks in the sand of a previous French military expedition told us we were on the right road. We drank water, 2.5 gallons of water per day per person, the regulation allowance in the desert. And yet a consuming thirst parched our throats, which no amount of drinking could satisfy. I had been in dread of sandstorms, and one day it was upon us. We were 200 miles from shelter, but we felt our sealed engines with their air and oil filters would get us through. We went on. For 4 days a burning wind carried millions of tons of sand across the face of the desert. For 4 days we choked, breathed sand, ate sand, rubbed at our inflamed eyes. Driving in the choking atmosphere of the trucks, filled with inches of fine dust which every bump would raise in a blinding cloud, became agony. The mechanism of our cameras filled with sand and they refused to work. But our Dodge engines carried on, mile after mile, until at last we reached shelter. We opened the motors to see if they had suffered from the sandstorm, and we found that they hadn't. For 2 more days the scorching wind blew, changing the face of the desert and obliterating all trace of our passage. We were now picking up our supplies for the second leg of the trip. From now on we were to give up our comfortable Pullman installations in the trucks. The trailer discarded, we were filling the trucks to the roof with cases of gasoline, long ago sent here for us by camel caravan. Every item was to be checked over and over. Food and water for 20 days. 300 gallons of water. The greater part of the desert still lay before us. But we felt we were veterans of the Sahara, and that nothing would stop us. 1.25 tons of gasoline in each truck. From now on, we would sleep on the ground. We had given the little boys cigarettes and pennies, and they hated to see us go. But the town was preparing to give us a send-off in the manner of the Sahara. As we drove, the crowd around us grew. Soon the sand and gravel kicked up by the flying hoofs of the horses made me fear for our windshields. In the heavy sand, we tried vainly to overtake the furiously galloping horses. Again alone. Truck number 2 was freed at last from its heavy trailer. The motors hummed cheerfully. The road was straight, level, and without turnings. Traffic was too scarce to bother us. No speed limit and no cops. I want to show you one of our camps. This is breakfast time just at sunrise. The temperature is not 120 now, it is around 40 and has been well below freezing during the night. We have slept on cots with all available blankets. But in the cold air and before the thermometer begins to climb, the sand is appreciably firmer than it will be during the day. And the start at sunrise will give us several hours of easier going. The temptation was always strong to drive at night, but each time we attempted it, being unable to gauge the firmness of the surface, we got hopelessly bogged in sand and lost much more time than we gained. But vegetation is again beginning to appear. In the distance we see nomads, their herds of goats and camels. We are approaching one of the wells. We have been warned against having anything to do with the Tuaregs at the wells, because an epidemic of smallpox is raging among them. But our drinking water has been put in gasoline drums, and after a week of drinking gasoline water, gasoline tea, gasoline coffee, and gasoline soup, we long for fresh water. Also the herds of goats and donkeys, the colorful desert people, make too picturesque a sight to resist. Made friends with the Tuaregs. I grouped two of the prettiest girls for a picture. Here in the desert, they do not insist on hiding their faces as they would in the towns. Our cleanest cans are filled with water. It is cloudy and it has a strong alkaline taste. And alas, as we soon find, it has strong medicinal properties. But it is a lovely change after gasoline. The camels like it, and each take their normal week supply, 40 to 50 gallons. It takes many refillings of the goat skin to water a herd of camels. The babies have to start very young. This one was born this morning, but already he has to be taught to take his fill of water, so that on the long march he will not be too much of a drain on the mother. Baby camels are lovely, white, woolly things. But they are all wrists and elbows and seem terribly ill at ease and unable to cope with this complicated world. Another 200 miles done easily in 2 days. We are now in a Tuareg stronghold in a hogger. We are guests at the court of King Amenokal, the king of the Tuaregs. This massive man rules over a territory almost as large as the United States. For us, the court orchestra plays. For us, the king's followers dance the traditional stick dance of the Tuaregs. No reputable woman would thus unveil her face, and I am told in whispers that these women are shameless. Greater honor, the king also displays his camels. They are priceless animals, and they are made to pace before us, gorgeously saddled, their heads held high, their legs moving in an odd rhythm, stiff and stately. And now we are on the last leg of the desert crossing. Scanty yellow grass begins to appear. We are approaching Niamey on